I still remember the cold touch of the floor against my palms. Even now, years later, that moment lives inside me like a scar that refuses to fade. It was Christmas, a day meant for warmth, for love, for family. And yet I lay there on the polished hardwood, staring at the shocked faces around me, wondering how I had allowed myself to be treated this way. When Marissa shoved me, I didn't lose my balance because of her strength. No, I fell because I never imagined she would dare to do something so cruel, so deliberate, so humiliating in front of a room full of people. I had walked toward the table with a tray of roasted vegetables, smiling quietly to myself as I listened to the chatter of my grandchildren. But the moment I stepped near the chair at the end of the table, she looked at me with pure contempt. "This seat belongs to my mother, not you," she said loudly, sharply, proudly, and then her hand landed on my shoulder and pushed. I didn't fight it. I didn't brace myself. I simply fell. The tray clattered to the floor, vegetables scattering like broken dignity. I heard a few gasps, some pity, some shock, some satisfaction, though no one said a word to help me. My own son didn't move. He sat there with his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the wall, pretending not to see his mother on the ground. I pushed myself up slowly, brushing off my dress, ignoring the burn in my knees. I didn't give Marissa the satisfaction of a reaction. I just nodded slightly, stepped back, and said nothing. Truly nothing. Silence was all I had left at that table, and I held onto it like armor. But that night, silence wasn't enough. When everyone was asleep, I sat alone in my study, my small sanctuary tucked away in the corner of the house. I folded my hands in my lap and stared at the faint reflection of myself in the window. Tired eyes, silver hair, and a heart full of pain I had never imagined my own family would inflict on me. As I sat there, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger, it wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. I whispered to myself, no more. I pulled out an old leather-bound journal, something I hadn't touched in years, and I began writing, not thoughts, not emotions, facts, dates, behaviors, every disrespectful comment Marissa had ever made, every time she dismissed my presence, every time she used my son as a shield, every whisper, every insult, every manipulation she assumed I was too old to notice. They say revenge is born from rage, but mine wasn't. Mine was born from remembering who I used to be before life reduced me to someone quiet, patient, invisible. I wasn't always this soft. I wasn't always this silent. And I certainly wasn't always this forgiving. Over the next months, I lived like a shadow, unnoticed yet observant. I hosted dinners, acted polite, listened to their conversations, and watched Marissa carefully. She strutted around the house like she owned it, speaking over me, ignoring my words, pretending I didn't exist. But I was learning her, every gesture, every weakness, every lie she told others to make herself appear perfect. Revenge wasn't my plan at first. No. My plan was simply to understand her, to see what kind of person had grown so comfortable disrespecting me. But the deeper I looked, the more I realized that she wasn't simply cruel. She was strategic. She wanted control over my son, over the household, over the family's public image. And I was the obstacle she wanted to erase. I didn't confront her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't show a single sign of suspicion. Instead, I smiled, nodded, and made myself appear smaller, quieter, older. I let her underestimate me. That was my greatest weapon. Years passed, and every year she grew more arrogant, more careless, more certain that I was blind and irrelevant. She didn't know I kept everything. Messages she sent behind my back, calls she tried to hide, things she bought with money that didn't belong to her, secrets she never thought would come out. And then came the morning 10 years later when she woke up to 27 missed calls. The moment I had been preparing for, but she didn't know it yet. She had no idea that the first domino had already fallen, and she certainly didn't know that everything she built, her reputation, her security, her precious image, was about to crumble. Because I wasn't the weak old woman she thought she pushed that Christmas. I was the one who had been quietly writing her ending. I began my mornings quietly, almost ceremoniously. Each day, I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and observed the house. The laughter and chatter of my grandchildren filled the rooms, and Marissa moved through it all like she owned the air itself. She was careful, meticulous, always ensuring that I was minimized in every social setting. But what she didn't know was that every glance, every movement, every word she uttered was being cataloged in my mind. I remembered everything. I remembered the way she spoke to the staff at family events, the way she rolled her eyes at my suggestions, the way she subtly undermined my son, Thomas, in front of everyone. She believed that control meant dominance, that showing power meant belittling those around her. But power, I knew, was subtle, it was quiet, it was patient, and I was patient. The first year after that Christmas, I did nothing visible. I smiled, I hosted dinners, I nodded when Marissa claimed authority, I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I became the woman everyone expected me to be, frail, quiet, forgiving, invisible. But inside, I was building the foundation for the day she would pay. I began by studying her habits. Every holiday, every social event, every small interaction, I noted what she prized. Her vanity, her desire for control, her fear of exposure. Every weakness was a thread I could pull, and I kept a journal, not just a diary of feelings, but a meticulous record of her behavior. I knew that when the time came, I would not need anger, I would need facts. Evidence, proof. By the third year, I had become invisible to her. She no longer saw me as a threat. She didn't even acknowledge my presence in the grand rooms of the house, and that was perfect. That invisibility was my shield. It allowed me to watch, to understand, to prepare. At night, I would sit alone, reviewing the journal and plan. Every insult, every moment of cruelty, every act of entitlement was mapped. I imagined scenarios in which her arrogance would be confronted, in which the world would see her as she truly was. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. The years were on my side. One afternoon, I received a phone call from a distant relative. They had no idea about the tension, the subtle games being played in my household. They simply chatted about holidays, family, and events. But even in this casual conversation, I found opportunity. Marissa would mention her plans, her priorities, her ambitions. And every word she spoke fed the strategy I was constructing. The 10th year arrived, and with it, the calm before the storm. Nothing in the house changed outwardly, yet inside, everything had shifted. I had created an invisible architecture, a plan so precise that even the slightest misstep from Marissa would trigger a cascade of consequences she could never anticipate. Then came that morning. I watched quietly from my room as Marissa woke up, her phone lighting up with 27 missed calls. My heart did not race. I did not smile. I simply watched, serene and steady. She had been caught in the net she had never noticed being woven around her. Every missed call was a prelude to revelation, a reminder that the past decade of her arrogance had led to this moment. Later that day, I would confront her, but not with shouts, not with public humiliation, not with threats. The confrontation would be quiet, deliberate, precise. Each truth I revealed would land with the weight of 10 years of observation and preparation. And she would have no defense, no excuses, only the cold realization of what she had done and the woman she had underestimated all these years. Even now, as I recall that period, I marvel at my own patience. I marvel at the quiet power that comes not from rage, but from control, understanding, and strategy. Revenge, I realized, was not in immediate gratification. It was in the slow, deliberate unfolding of truth, the careful orchestration of awareness, and the undeniable confrontation with consequences. And so I waited, I watched, I observed. And all the while, I built the stage for the moment when Marissa would finally see me as I truly was, not frail, not quiet, not invisible, but unstoppable. Because by the time she would fully wake up to the reality of what had been happening, it would be too late to change anything. Every arrogance, every slight, every cruel word would meet its reckoning. And I would be there, calm, composed, and completely in control. The morning sun streamed through the curtains, painting streaks of gold across the floor. I watched from the doorway, pretending to adjust a vase on the hallway table as Marissa fumbled with her phone. The screen flashed relentlessly missed calls, unread messages, notifications piling up like a storm warning. She hadn't noticed yet that the first domino had already fallen. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the notifications, her face pale. eyes darting across the screen as if each number held a new threat. 27 missed calls, 27 reminders that the past decade of carelessness, arrogance, and manipulation had not gone unnoticed. I made my presence known with a quiet clearing of the throat. She spun around, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Evelyn, what are you doing up?" she asked, trying to maintain composure, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. I let the silence stretch for a moment, letting her panic settle in. "I'm up early, enjoying the morning light," I said softly, almost casually. But there was a weight in my tone, a quiet command that made her shift uneasily. She glanced at the phone again, then back at me. Did something happen?" I smiled faintly, leaning against the doorway. "It's only a series of reminders," I said, though the truth behind those messages was far more pointed. Every single one had been sent with care, meticulously timed, each one a puzzle piece in the larger picture I had been constructing for years. She swallowed hard, and I could see the realization dawning in her eyes. The bravado, the arrogance, the certainty that I had been nothing more than a passive, forgiving mother-in. All of it was crumbling. She was beginning to understand just slightly that I had been planning, watching, waiting. I walked toward the kitchen, each step deliberate. "Do you remember that Christmas 10 years ago?" I asked, keeping my tone light, almost conversational. "The one where you thought you could push me aside in front of everyone." Her eyes widened. I interrupted gently, holding up a finger. "No need to speak yet. Let's just remember together." I leaned over the counter, tracing the edges of a cutting board idly, as though the conversation were mundane. But every word, every gesture, every pause was calculated. I let her squirm, let her panic build just beneath the surface. The first cracks were forming, and she hadn't even realized the full weight of the storm. "Over the years," I continued, "I've kept careful track of everything. Every slight, every insult, every time you assumed you were untouchable. I let the words hang in the air, letting them settle into her mind like seeds. Do you think the past disappears just because time passes?" Her breath hitched. Her eyes darted away, down at her hands, twisting nervously. I don't understand." I moved closer, calmly, without a hint of anger, just presence. "You will, Marissa, you will." The rest of the morning passed in tense silence. I spoke minimally, allowing her anxiety to swell naturally. Each glance I gave her, each movement I made in the kitchen, was a reminder that I was not the same woman she had humiliated years ago. I was patient, yes, but I was also in control. The power dynamic had shifted subtly, invisibly, but unmistakably. By noon, she had begun checking her emails, her phone, even the messages she thought she had deleted. My records, meticulously prepared, were everywhere reminders, notifications, small hints that she could no longer ignore. The realization hit her slowly but inexorably. The woman she had once pushed and mocked was now orchestrating a reckoning she could neither escape nor ignore. When she looked at me again, her eyes were no longer defiant. They were cautious, calculating, fearful. She had glimpsed the first hints of what was coming, and she knew somewhere deep inside that she had underestimated me for the last time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make threats. I didn't need to. Each subtle gesture, each quiet word, each calculated pause carried the weight of years of observation and preparation. By the time she fully realized the depth of my strategy, it would be too late for excuses, too late for apologies, too late for denial. And as I watched her fidget, nervously scanning the room and her phone, I felt the first spark of satisfaction. Not of revenge yet, that was still coming, but the satisfaction of knowing that the first layer of my plan was working. The first domino had fallen, and the rest were lined up, ready to follow. I barely slept that night. Not because of anger, that feeling had burned out years ago, but because of the cold, electric calm that had settled into my bones. There is a strange clarity that comes after a decade of swallowing bitterness. A clarity that sharpens every sound, every breath, every thought. By the time dawn crept into the house, pale and silent, I was already awake, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. I kept staring at the slow swirl on the surface, thinking about the last 10 years not with pain anymore, but with purpose. The house was so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. Tick-tock, tick-tock, each second falling exactly where it needed to fall. Perfect timing, perfect rhythm. A reminder that everything, even revenge, required patience. When I finally heard footsteps upstairs, soft, hurried, uneven, I didn't move. I waited, calm, still, present. Her day was about to begin, but nothing about it would be ordinary. I heard drawers open, close, open again, then the familiar chime of her phone, a beat of silence, and then a gasp. A sharp, panicked gasp. That was when I allowed myself the smallest smile. 27 missed calls. 27 alarms from the past she had tried to bury. 27 reminders that I had not forgotten and that I had not forgiven. She came downstairs with the stiffness of someone walking into a trap they didn't fully understand. I stayed seated, letting the morning light catch my face, soft, calm, unreadable. Her eyes darted to me, then back to the phone. "Evelyn, good morning." Her voice cracked, not a lot, just enough to reveal the fear she was trying desperately to hide. I replied with a gentleness she didn't deserve. "Good morning, dear." A lie disguised as affection. She moved around the kitchen nervously, pretending to look for something in a cabinet she had already opened twice. Her hands trembled. The phone buzzed again, causing her to jump slightly. "What? Did you sleep well?" she asked, voice too high, too thin. "I did," I answered, though the truth didn't matter. The answer wasn't meant to comfort her. It was meant to force her to acknowledge me, the same woman she had pushed aside 10 years earlier like trash, cluttering her perfect Christmas table. She kept glancing at her phone. Tap, scroll, tap, tap. Her breath grew shorter. She checked her messages again, even though she had already seen them. She was waiting for me to speak, hoping I wouldn't. "Too late? Strange morning, isn't it?" I said softly, her head jerked up. "W, what do you mean?" I folded my hands on the table, meeting her eyes slowly, deliberately, letting the silence stretch until she squirmed. "Your phone has been quite busy." A flash of terror crossed her face, brief but unmistakable. It's probably nothing." "Oh, I'm sure it's something." I replied, her lips parted, but she had no words. That was the first shift, the moment I saw the fear begin to take form behind her eyes. Small, fragile, but growing. She tried to compose herself, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know what's happening today. People must be confused, or there's some glitch." I tilted my head. "Is that what you think?" She froze. I knew she wanted to ask, "Did you do something?" But she didn't dare, not yet. Instead, she whispered, "I didn't expect this." "You didn't expect many things," I said softly. "Including me?" The color drained from her face. I stood up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles of my cardigan. No rush, no aggression. Just a quiet, controlled presence. Real power never needs to raise its voice. "I'm going to the garden." I said, "Join me when you're ready." Her voice trembled. "W. Why, what's happening?" I turned slightly, meeting her eyes with a calmness that made her swallow. "You'll know in time." Then I walked out, leaving her with her shaking hands, her buzzing phone, her growing dread. When I reached the garden, the morning breeze was cool against my skin. The sunlight filtered through the branches, warm and gentle. Peaceful, almost ironic. I sat on the bench under the apple tree, the same tree that had stood outside this house since before she ever existed in our lives. The same tree she had once told my son to cut down because old things make the property look tired. Old things. That was what I was to her, a burden, a relic, an inconvenience, but relics survive, relics endure, relics outlive the ones who underestimate them. Footsteps approached hesitantly. She finally came outside, clutching her phone like it was a shield. She stood a few feet away, afraid to come closer. "Evelyn." I raised my hand gently. "Sit." She sat. The silence was thick, charged, heavy. I finally looked at her, my voice soft but sharp enough to cut through the air. "Tell me, Marissa, do you remember Christmas 10 years ago?" Her breath caught. "Evelyn, please, I was young. You pushed me." I said quietly, in front of everyone, in front of my son, in front of my grandchildren. She closed her eyes, face tightening. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes are dropping a glass." I replied. "Mistakes are forgetting a birthday." I leaned slightly closer. "What you did was cruelty. She flinched. I watched her chest rise and fall faster, panic taking shape. I didn't mean you meant every word, every gesture, every scar. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I turned my face toward the sunlight again. 10 years is a long time to wait, isn't it? Her voice trembled. Wait for what? I smiled small, almost tender, clarity. She swallowed hard, and consequences. Her breath stopped. She looked at me the way a person looks at a shadow in a dark hallway, aware it is real, aware it is dangerous, but too afraid to move. Evelyn, what did you do? I didn't answer, not yet. Revenge is not thrown, it is placed, carefully, piece by piece. Instead, I spoke softly, almost with kindness. You should rest today. She stared at me, terrified. You'll need your strength, I added, for what's coming. I watched Marissa walk back into the house with a stiffness that didn't belong to her age. The morning sunlight shimmered on her shoulders, but she looked cold. Colder than I had ever seen her. A decade ago, she would walk with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed her comfort. Now she walked like a woman who sensed the ground shifting beneath her, inch by inch. I didn't follow her. I let her stew in her fear. Fear is not effective when you apply it heavily. It works best in whispers, in moments, in the quiet space between breaths. I remained in the garden, running my fingers along the wooden bench I had sanded myself 14 years ago. Back then, I had built it because I wanted a peaceful corner to drink tea with my daughter, Helena. Life had other plans. After Helena passed, the bench became a place where I sat alone, thinking about the things we keep, the things we lose, and the things we simply endure. Today, it was my throne. By the time I walked back into the house, Marissa was pacing the living room. She jumped slightly when she heard the door open. Her eyes were red, either from panic or from the messages she kept reading and rereading. How long have you been standing there? She asked, voice tight. Long enough. I replied. Her breath hitched. Evelyn, please, tell me what's going on. Who are these people calling me? Why now? What did you do? I walked past her calmly, placing my gardening gloves on the counter. You're asking too many questions, I said gently. You don't have enough answers yet. She followed me like a shadow, then give me answers. I turned to face her fully, watching her try to hold herself together by a thread. It was almost impressive how tightly she clung to her false sense of control. Did you ever wonder, I said slowly, what happens when the things we bury decide to climb out? Her lips parted. Evelyn, please sit, I instructed. She sat, her hands trembled in her lap. She still hadn't noticed that her wedding ring was missing since morning. Her fingers were too numb to feel its absence. She also hadn't noticed that the house felt colder. Emptier, not because anything had changed physically, but because her sense of safety had collapsed. I sat across from her, folding my hands in my lap like a judge quietly preparing a verdict. You pushed me at Christmas. I began, voice steady, because you wanted to show everyone that you had replaced me, that you were the new woman of the family, the one with authority, the one with respect, the one who mattered. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. I know I did wrong, but people change, you didn't. I cut in calmly, you just got better at pretending. She swallowed hard, I never thought you would. Hold on to that moment. I leaned back slightly. Oh, I didn't hold on to the moment, I held on to the lesson. She blinked. What lesson? That kindness can be a mistake. I said simply, that silence can be dangerous, and that underestimating a quiet woman is the biggest error a person can make. She covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders trembled. I let the silence stretch, let it breathe, let it wrap around her like fog. Finally, she lifted her head. Evelyn, please, what's happening to me? I stood up, walked to the window, and gently pulled the curtain aside. The driveway outside was empty, not a single car, not even her parents. She hadn't noticed that either. Do you know what the worst kind of fear is? I asked softly. She shook her head, the kind that hasn't fully shown its face yet. She inhaled shakily. Are you threatening me? No, I replied. I don't threaten, I act. Her body stiffened. I turned fully and met her eyes, no smile, no warmth, no mercy. 10 years ago, you pushed me to the floor in front of my grandchildren, in front of strangers, in front of my own son. You humiliated me. You made me small. Her tears spilled. I know, but I've changed, you have, I said. You've become weaker. She jerked slightly. Evelyn and I added softly, have become stronger. Her phone buzzed again. She flinched violently, then fumbled with the screen. Another missed call. Another voicemail. Another name she recognized from 10 years ago. She looked at me helplessly. Why are all these people contacting me? Because, I said, they finally know the truth. Her lips trembled. What truth? That you lied to everyone. I said coldly, about Christmas, about me, about your life, about what really happened that night. Her breath froze. I walked slowly across the room until I stood right in front of her. Her eyes widened with dread. You made everyone believe I started the argument. I whispered that I caused the chaos, that you were the victim, and you repeated it so many times to so many people that it became the story the world believed. She clenched her jaw. I was angry. I reacted without thinking. And I replied, have had 10 years to think. Her eyes darted around the room. What did you tell them? Who did you contact? Evelyn, I'm begging you. I placed a finger to my lips. A small, gentle gesture. She went quiet instantly. You're not supposed to know everything yet. I whispered, not until the pieces fall exactly where I placed them. She stared at me petrified. I turned and walked toward the kitchen. Make yourself some tea. It may help. She didn't move. Go on. I said softly. Your hands need something to do. Your mind is already too busy. She stood shakily, walking toward the stove with the steps of a woman carrying invisible weight. She tried to steady her breathing, but it kept breaking. She filled the kettle. She turned on the burner. She leaned on the counter for support. Her voice finally cracked. Evelyn, whatever you're planning, please don't ruin my life. I didn't turn around. Dear, I said calmly, that already happened a long time ago. She froze. Then she whispered, voice broken, what did you do? I spoke softly, slowly, with precision. I simply returned the truth to the people who needed to hear it, and truth, as you're about to learn, carries its own consequences. The kettle whistled sharp, shrill, piercing, cutting through the silence like a blade. She jumped again. I listened to the sound with a serenity she couldn't fathom. Then I said quietly, tomorrow morning, the real unraveling begins. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the counter to keep from collapsing. I didn't help her. I watched, letting her feel the first cracks of the collapse she had earned. I woke up just after sunrise, my head heavy, my throat dry, but something else felt heavier. Silence. My phone was vibrating nonstop beside me. I rubbed my eyes, trying to make sense of the bright screen glowing in the dim room. 27 missed calls, all from Daniel. For a moment, I just stared at the number. Then my stomach twisted. I called him back immediately, but the call didn't connect. Before I could try again, another notification appeared. Mom, please call me, it's important. My fingers trembled. I dialed again. This time the line rang once and cut off. I sat there frozen, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the morning birds outside my window. Then a different number flashed on my screen. Hello? I whispered, ma'am. A calm voice said, this is the hospital. You're listed as a contact. We need you to come immediately. My breath stopped. I didn't ask questions. I didn't change clothes. I barely grabbed my keys. I rushed out the door, my chest hurting with every step. I kept imagining everything, every possible terrible thing, while driving faster than I should have. By the time I reached the hospital lobby, my hands were ice, cold, and my legs felt weak. And there he was, my son, pacing near the reception counter. His face looked pale, his eyes swollen as if he hadn't slept. Daniel, I called out. He looked at me, but didn't move, didn't run to me like he used to when he was little. His shoulders rose and fell as he tried to steady his breathing, but the anger in his eyes told me something was terribly wrong. I stepped closer. Daniel, what happened? Is everyone all right? His jaw tightened. You should ask yourself that. My heart dropped. What do you mean? You told me you were fine last night. He said in a voice that didn't sound like him. You didn't tell me anything. I felt my pulse thundering. Daniel, talk to me. What happened? Is Savannah okay? He bit down on his lip, holding back a storm. Mom, Savannah is in the hospital. I felt the world tilt under my feet. What? I whispered. What happened to her? Daniel stared into my eyes, and the pain in his face twisted into something I had never seen. Betrayal, you happened to her. My knees almost buckled. Daniel, No, no, please, what are you saying? She fainted last night, he said, wiping his face with a trembling hand. Her blood pressure dropped. Stress, shock. My wife collapsed because of the environment you created. I pressed my palm over my mouth. Daniel, I didn't. Yes, you did, he snapped. You've been pushing her for years. You've made her feel worthless, unwanted, and unwelcome. Last night was the final straw. He opened a folder he was holding, one I hadn't noticed before. And Mom, there's more. He pulled out a document, one that had my signature. My heart froze. I found this last night. He said quietly, you changed your will. Everything goes to charity, and me, Savannah, gets nothing, not even the house. I swallowed hard. Daniel, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. His voice cracked. You punished her. You punished my wife because she pushed you in front of the whole family. I looked at him with tears burning my eyes. Daniel, she didn't just push me. She told me I didn't belong. She humiliated me. And you think that justifies destroying her life? He snapped. 10 years of tension, and this is how you respond. I opened my mouth, but no words came out because the truth was complicated, too complicated. Daniel stepped back like he couldn't even stand near me. I'm taking time away, he said quietly, from you. The words stabbed right through me. Daniel, please, don't do this. Don't leave me like this. He shook his head, tears falling freely now. Mom, I love you, but you crossed a line, and I don't know how to come back from this. I reached out, but he stepped away. I need to be with my wife, he said, voice cracking. She came close to losing everything last night, and I won't let her face this alone. He walked toward the elevator, his steps heavy, his shoulders shaking. I stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and grief. I felt like I was floating, watching my life crumble in slow motion. When I finally sat down on a plastic chair, all I could hear was my heartbeat. Slow, loud, breaking. I had lived through many storms, but nothing felt like this, watching my own son turn away from me. And deep down, beneath all the shock and hurt, I felt something else too. The beginning of the revenge I had been planning for 10 years shifting into its final shape, and once it fully formed, nothing in my daughter-in-law's life would ever be the same again. I walked slowly into the living room, the quiet so thick it felt like it could suffocate. The Christmas lights flickered, casting faint shadows across the polished floor, and I could hear Savannah's heavy breathing from the other side of the hallway. She didn't see me yet. She didn't even know I had returned. I sat down at the edge of the couch, letting my hands rest in my lap. I let the silence grow. It was heavy, deliberate. I wanted her to feel every second of the weight she had ignored for so many years. When she finally stepped into the room, her eyes were wide, lips trembling. Mom, she started, but I raised my hand gently, stopping her mid-sentence. Sit, I said softly. My voice was calm, but inside I felt the fire of every insult, every shove, every public humiliation she had inflicted on me over the years. She obeyed, hands trembling on her knees. I watched her, studying every flicker of fear, every twitch of guilt that betrayed her facade. You pushed me at the Christmas table 10 years ago. I said quietly, you humiliated me in front of my son, in front of the family, in front of everyone. And you thought silence would let you get away with it. You thought no one would remember. Her voice cracked. I didn't think. Stop. I interrupted. You never think. You only act. You only react. And every time you hurt me, you thought it was a victory. But you didn't see me. You didn't know me, and that was your mistake. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope. She flinched. This, I said, placing it on the coffee table, is a little reminder of what happens when arrogance meets patience, when lies meet truth. She looked down at it, fear rising in her eyes. She knew this wasn't a normal letter. She knew it wasn't a simple note. She had felt the subtle shift in my energy the moment I walked into the house. Open it, I said softly. Her hands shook as she lifted the flap. Inside were photos, messages, and documents she had long thought buried, evidence of her schemes, her lies, her manipulations. Every attempt she made to rewrite the past, every secret she tried to hide, was now laid bare in front of her. Her lips trembled and tears fell freely. Mom, please. I know. I said, and that is exactly why I waited. I waited until the time was right, until you were most vulnerable, until the moment you believed you were untouchable. I leaned back, letting the weight of my words settle. Do you understand now what it feels like to be powerless? To realize that your actions have consequences you cannot control? She nodded, sobbing silently. The arrogance she had carried for so long had been replaced by a fragile fear. I didn't want to destroy you. I continued. I wanted you to see. I wanted you to understand. And now you have no choice but to face the truth. You have no allies left. The world you tried to manipulate is collapsing, piece by piece. Her gaze fell to the floor. Mom, I'm sorry. I never realized. Realization comes too late sometimes. I said, but what you feel now, this fear, this shame, let it guide you to something better. Let it remind you that respect is earned, not demanded, that kindness is not weakness, that actions, even small ones, ripple through time. I stood and walked past her toward the window, letting the sunlight spill across the room. She remained seated, a shell of the woman who had once commanded the room with her ego and entitlement. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I simply existed as a calm presence, a reminder of everything she had ignored. Finally, I turned to her. Remember this moment, Savannah. This is the day you truly saw me, not as someone to push aside, not as someone to humiliate, but as someone who endured, someone who waited, someone who acted. I walked out of the room, closing the door gently behind me. She remained there, surrounded by the evidence of her choices, staring at the envelope, trembling, realizing that life had finally caught up with her. For the first time in 10 years, I felt free from the humiliation, the anger, the fear. And as I stepped into the quiet hall, I whispered to myself, a soft but firm declaration. Justice is patient, justice is silent, and when it arrives, it is absolute. The Christmas lights reflected on the floor like tiny stars. Outside, the world went on. Inside, one lesson had been learned. Arrogance and cruelty eventually meet the calm, unyielding power of truth. I finally sat in my chair, letting the weight of all I had endured settle. And for the first time in years, I smiled, not out of triumph, but because the story had finally ended the way it was meant to. Savannah's cries were muffled in the background. I didn't move, I didn't intervene. I let her feel it all, because sometimes the most powerful revenge is not to hurt, but to simply let life unfold its own consequences while you remain untouched, unshaken, and at peace. And at that moment, I knew everything was exactly as it should be.